Welcome to this session on international services in 2021, so after the transition. My name is Dean Wooten. Now we're just going to look at the changes. So looking at B2B, business to business services first, and services going into the EU. So I've got a UK company, and they're invoicing an EU company for services. Now these are B2B services. And now all that happens in the UK is they just go in box 6 of your VAT return. Box 6 on your VAT return is just a sales box. So you still have to put the net in box 6. But the supply is outside the scope of UK VAT. It's a B2B service outside the scope as it's always been. There's a mandatory reverse charge on the EU company. So fundamentally, there's no real changes to B2B services. The main difference is compliance in that in 2020, you had to complete an EC sales list for this particular service, and you had to put a little indicator 3 on the EC sales list to tell the HMRC system that you're reporting services. Now, from 2021, January 21, the EC sales list has gone for services. Even if you're operating in Northern Ireland under the Northern Ireland Protocol, you still don't do an EC sales list in respect of services. The Northern Ireland Protocol is for goods. So services just don't get reported on the EC sales list from the 1st of January 2021. So fundamentally, B2B services have stayed the same apart from the ditching of EC sales lists. Now, what will change if we went to billing a non-EU company? Well, not a lot really. It's still a B2B supply. The place of supply is outside the UK. It's still a box 6 entry in the VAT return, and that's it. We never thought about EC sales lists when we were billing non-EU companies, and there's no mandatory reverse charge on non-EU companies. So fundamentally, we have B2B services remaining as they were. The only difference is a ditching of EC sales lists when you're billing EU businesses. Now, if I flip this around and look at UK companies buying in services, so I'm sure you're all aware that that has always been reverse charge, and let's just see if that's changed after the 1st of January 21. So I've got a UK company, and they're buying in services from outside the UK. It doesn't matter where they come from. They could come from France, Germany, China, America, it does not matter. The fact is, you're a UK-based business and you are buying in services from outside the UK. Now that is still, as it has always been, a mandatory reverse charge. Now the reverse charge entries are put the VAT in box 1 and the net in box 6. That's effectively your reverse charge. You then try and see if you can recover that. And that will depend on what you're using those services for. If I'm a fully taxable business, then I'm going to recover the whole lot in box 4, and I put the net in box 7. If the UK company is partially exempt, then obviously your box 4 recovery might well be restricted. Now this is identical to what the rules were prior to the end of the transitional period. So there's been no changes to reverse charges. You always reverse charged services brought in from overseas. So let's move on to the B2C rule, business to consumer rule for services, and see if there's any changes there. It's got a UK company providing services to a French individual. Now the basic B2C rule is supplied where the supplier belongs. So therefore you'd ordinarily, assuming the service was ordinarily standard rated, you'd ordinarily charge VAT. Now that is your basic B2C rule, and the basic B2C rule has not changed. There are, however, some overrides. Now, one of the ones that's subtly changed is the override for electronically supplied services. Now, let's look at the position in 2020. Now, electronically supplied services are things like your client's got a website and they download, what they sell is games, software, music, films, and users can come onto their website, put their credit card details in, and they just download whatever they're chasing, be it music, etc. So electronically supplied services. Now the place of supply for these has, for quite some time now, been where the customer belongs. So if I'm downloading to a French individual in 220, The place of supply is in France. I do not have a registration threshold in France, therefore I must charge French VAT or to that download to that French individual. Now that would be a Union MOS registration ordinarily. You don't really want to be registered in every single member state. So you bypass that by registering under the MOS scheme, the Union MOS scheme. And this is just an output tax collection vehicle really, where it lists all the then 28 member states, and you just put the French VAT in the French box, the Austrian VAT in the Austrian box, and you submit that via the HMRC portal, or you did for 2020. Now there was a VAT de minimis limit, so this is really if you were predominantly a UK selling business, your customers were mainly UK, but you had a few sales into Europe. Now they introduced a de minimis, whereby if your sales into Europe in a calendar year were under 8818, odd number, but actually it's 10,000 euros being converted into sterling, so our rule is 8818. Then if it was under that, then you didn't have to be charging the destination VAT rate. You could just charge UK VAT. That 8818, it was your total sales into the EU in a calendar year. Now that was in 2020. Now in 21, there has been some subtle changes. Now the de minimis rule is no longer available. So if you've got a client having electronically supplied services, then any download into any member state is VAT in that member state. The Union MOS scheme, however, is no longer available to UK businesses. The final MOS return, Union MOS return, was due in on the 20th of January 21, so that should have been well done by now. Now, as a non-EU country, which of course we now are, we can now access the non-Union MOS scheme. And you should have registered for that from the 1st of January 21. The impact is still the same. It's an output tax collection vehicle. The difference is you're submitting the return via the Irish portal or the Maltese portal, for argument's sake. It's wherever you want to register for non-Union MOS. Ireland and Malta are popular because their websites are in English, but it doesn't matter where you register for non-Union MOS. There's no pros and cons. It's just an output tax collection vehicle. You're still accounting for French VAT, Austrian VAT, German VAT, etc. It's just the portal through which you submit your return. And that's now changed. The Union MOS scheme is shut and you're now under the non-Union MOS scheme. Alright, so let's look at how that impacts. So electronically supplied services in 2021. To, let's say, individuals, and my example here is French individuals. Now, EU VAT is due. In this case, French VAT is due on that download. There used to be the Union MOS scheme. There used to be an 8818 de minimis rule. Now, that de minimis rule has gone, so therefore there definitely is French VAT due on that download. The Union MOS scheme has gone. This client has to register for the non-Union MOS, and then they would account for the French VAT on their non-Union MOS return. When I say they have to, they don't absolutely have to. They could properly register in France if they wanted to, but practically most of these electronically supplied service businesses, they tend to use MOS. Now there's another change which will affect lots of people, I think, lots of businesses, and that's this override in Schedule 4A, Para 16. It only applies to B2C. Business to consumer. Now, Para 16 is a list of very specific services. Now, advertising, copyrights, etc. But the third bullet in black there, that's quite common. Consultants, lawyers, accountants. You're a Para 16 service if you're an accountant. You're a Para 16 service if you're a lawyer. It also extends to other services as well. But if you're a Para 16 service, there used to be a very specific override that changed your place of supply. Now, prior to the 1st of January 21, Para 16 services were outside the scope of UK VAT when supplying to non-EU consumers. So if an accountant was billing somebody residing in Jersey, for argument's sake, then they wouldn't have charged VAT because the individual was residing in Jersey, which is non-EU. Now, from the 1st of January 21, the Para 16 overrides is for anybody outside the UK. So accountants, lawyers, etc. will not charge VAT to any overseas client from the 1st of January 21. You've never charged it on B2B because they're all outside, the B2B is overseas, then that shifts it overseas. But for individuals, you used to have this differential whereby you charged EU residents VAT, but you didn't charge non-EU residents VAT. That's all changed. And now, if a client belongs outside the UK, you do not charge VAT. And there's no EU registration obligation either. So put that into context. Let's say I'm a UK company providing accountancy services to an individual who lives in France. Now, there is no UK VAT from the 1st of January 21 because of the Para 16 override, and there is no EU VAT either. It's almost like a little gap that seems to have just slipped through. But it is what it is, and you literally do not charge VAT to any overseas client from the 1st of January 2021. Now, there is a change to the use and enjoyment rules. In 220, we had use and enjoyment rules for a number of services, including the hire of goods. Now, use and enjoyment used to be, I've got a UK place of supply, for whatever reason, but the goods were used non-EU, and the reverse applied as well. So non-EU place of supply used in the UK. Now, from the 1st of January 21, the rule is much, much wider, and we'll come across it more often as a result. Now, if we've got a UK place of supply, but it's used outside the UK, then the place of supply shifts to where it's used and enjoyed. It only applies to specific services. Hiring of goods is probably the most common. So let's look at an example on that. So let's say I've got a UK company supplying equipment, hire of equipment, to non-UK co. Now that initially, you're looking at that and saying that's a B2B outside the scope of UK VAT. That's our initial thought. But it is used in the UK. Now from the 1st of January 21, that will shift the place of supply. It did shift it before when it was a non-EU company you were hiring the goods to. But from the 1st of January 21, it just has to be a non-UK company. So what that means is there's no longer this no UK VAT provision. You're not using B2B rules. You're using the use and enjoyment rules for hire of equipment. And that UK company must charge VAT to that non-UK company. The non-UK company should be able to recover it via the 13th directive, but it has changed for the UK company. They now charge VAT. Previously, they didn't charge VAT when they were billing a French company, say. Now, it's much wider. If they're billing any company outside the UK for use and enjoyment services such as hire equipment, you have got this shift. Finally, let's look at specified services. So before the 1st of January 21, input tax was deductible on costs relating to certain financial services, financial intermediaries in the main, provided to non-EU customers. Now, this allowed exempt businesses to recover input tax on their non-EU business. It's quite a generous provision, this. Now, from the 1st of January 21, the recovery extends to financial related services provided to non-UK customers. So the rule has been extended from just non-EU to basically non-UK. So EU customers are now within these provisions. You get a much better input tax recovery from the 1st of January 21 as a financial services business in the UK. There is a similar rule for insurance intermediaries. It's a bit tighter for those though, because there was always the same provision, but these insurance intermediaries, if the insured person is in the UK, then it didn't work. And that changed a few years back because of the Hastings Direct case. So insurance intermediaries is slightly tighter, but financial intermediaries, this is quite an important change from the 1st of January 21. Well, that concludes this quick roundup of the changes to international services post-Brexit. My name is Dean Wootton. Any other information you want on this, do get hold of me via my website.